Welcome, Steve. Thank you very much for coming back for another episode on Agility Chefs. I really got a kick out of your new live stream, of your own live stream as well. You're going to show some details later on. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience again, please, for anybody who missed it last week?
Well, thank you, John, for inviting me. It's the second time here on your show, and as you said, this thing with webinars is a bit contagious. So I owe it to you that I started my own just 3 days after being live on with you. Anyway, I am Steve Tendon, the managing director of Tameflow Consulting Limited, a small company based out of Malta in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And what I do is that I create pragmatic, human-centered, inclusive, sustainable, systemic breakthrough performance innovation in knowledge-intensive digital businesses. Basically, if you are familiar with all the agile approaches like Scrum, Kanban, Safe, Less, and others, well, my work is in that area, but I have done it my way, and it's called Tameflow. So, John, are you there?
Yes, all set. Thank you very much. So we're
That looks like a whiteboard
indeed
or a flip chart.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to just myself. So I'm going to drop Steve off just for now, and so we get full focus on the flip chart. And just do that now. And I'll also remove some of the branding as well, so you get a full view of what's going on here. If you want to join, there's a simple URL, bit.ly/Steve Tendon 2. If you want to join us on camera, we'd be delighted to have you on. But for now, I'm going to actually turn that off because we need a little bit more space on the screen while I explain objectives and key results. So there's a wonderful book on OKRs by John Doerr, and that's really where I got most of my subject matter for this talk today. There's a new book as well out from Sense and Respond Press that I haven't actually read yet, but I have ordered it. John Doerr, he's a famous venture capitalist, and he helped Alan Grove and Intel, and objectives and key results were implemented in Google and lots of other successful companies. So while objectives and key results kind of gave me an uncomfortable feeling in terms of dealing with complexity, I did want to explore more how useful these might be, because they seem to be getting very, very popular. Bono is referenced in the book Measure What Matters, and one of the things that Bono, the famous rock star, said, he said they were basically all over the map. It's kind of an expression where they weren't really focused in the one organization. They were kind of doing all sorts of things, trying to help make the world better and so on, but they weren't being very focused on how they were doing that. Objectives are about the what, and the key results are about the how. In Google, which is there's a kind of a paper on whatmatters.com. There's a Google playbook on how they actually deal with objectives and key results. Of course, you shouldn't just copy this for your company, but it's still worth looking at. They use kind of traffic light thing, which again made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Green, if you hit like between 70% and 100% of your key results for your objectives. Amber, yellow for 40 to 60%, and below 40% to was being red. So what is it about objectives and key results? Well, objectives are supposed to be big, not incremental. So you're really striving to do something really great, something really inspiring. So the objective should be inspiring, should be significant. And so what in the objectives you're specifying some goals, some intents, there's some clear value being demonstrated by those. They're tangible and objective, and most importantly, they're unambiguous. So one would be able to tell whether you achieve that objective or not. In terms of the key results, they tend to be more action oriented. So they're specific and time bound. They're measurable and verifiable based on evidence. I'm going to show you some examples of my own personal OKRs later on. and they should be really outcome based rather than output or activities. I'm going to show you my own personal ones that they're just a draft for you to critique, and let's see where I went wrong in terms of did I list activities and outputs as opposed to actual things that can demonstrate results. So just digging a little bit into objectives and key results, I was a bit nervous about them because with management by objectives, you get this kind of a cascade of objectives down through your organization. What I really like about objectives and key results is that they're collaborative and interdependent. So instead of it being kind of like a roll down of objectives and key results from one level to the next level of the organization, it's actually bi-directional. But not only that, but they're also horizontal. So you can see there's dependencies between different objectives and key results across different teams, across different departments, and even basically at all levels. I found that really encouraging. And so I was asking somebody yesterday who deals with objectives and key results and said, well, how do you record these? And often people might put them on Google Docs or SharePoint or something like that. I think what I'd prefer would be something like a Kanban board, something like, because if you have a multi-level Kanban, you can then link the various objectives and key results to each other, and with fairly good tooling, you could link to the dependencies of the objectives and key results would be more searchable. Because the most important thing is that if, for example, I had a dependency on Steve, which I'll show you later on, Steve will be surprised when he sees this. If I have a dependency on Steve, well, I need to check in with Steve, because there's no point in me saying I've got this objective in the next quarter if somebody I'm dependent on isn't up for that. So there needs to be some kind of discussion about how we do that. What I really like about it as well is there's focus. So a lot of the time I can struggle with executives saying, you need to limit work in progress. Objectives and key results are effectively doing that for free out of the box, because essentially you're saying we're going to focus on what's most important in the next quarter. It's kind of like a rallying cry, really, for what's really important. And if there's anything else outside of those, maybe you should be questioning yourself why you're actually doing that. Even though the objectives and key results tend to be quarterly, they tend to be reviewed weekly. And one thing that's really, really important is that we don't have any arbitrary targets. We had some arbitrary targets for the number of tests in the United Kingdom a few weeks ago, and I thought it was a bit silly, really, because they were just chasing a number rather than what kind of tests would be done and what kind of areas for what kind of cases and so on. Some lovely quotations here from John Doerr. So try to outbehave the competition. If all the OKRs are green, they're wrong. I really like that. So if your culture is that we achieve all of our objectives every single quarter, that might be a sign that there really isn't much stretch in what you're trying to achieve in your objectives and key results. So stretch is a dangerous word. You want to be stretching so much that you're overloading the organization and doing the opposite of focus. But I'll talk about how we deal with that later on. How do we make sure that we still stay focused on what's most important, but still have some stretch? Another quote I really liked as well is I've heard a few different quotes from John Doerr. One of them was, knowledge is important, ideas are important, but execution matters most. And if I'm honest with myself, I think that's really where I've been struggling in terms of my own personal work, not the work that I do with my clients, but the personal work that I do, all these things that I want to do. Lots of ideas, but trying to focus and getting some stuff done in the next quarter, that has been kind of one of my challenges, quite frankly. I want to show you a couple of other things as well. So I prepared some other content based on the Google playbook and things to kind of watch out for. So what are some of the traps that you might have as per the Google OKR playbook that's on whatmatters.com? And there's a bit.ly URL there as well if you want to go straight to that yourself. Google OKR playbook, you can see capital letters there. So not distinguishing between committed objectives and key results and aspirational objectives and key results, because then what could happen is we end up focusing on the aspirational stuff. We don't deal with the most important stuff. Maybe having some business as usual. It's okay to make sure you do need to include everything, but just having incremental type OKRs, not really stretching, not really doing anything ambitious, which leads into this one, having timid aspirational OKRs. Sandbagging would be another example where you're basically under-egging, over-egging, having low value objectives, and maybe having insufficient key results for some committed objectives. That's a kind of a key one for me. So we have the objectives, they look pretty good, but we've got insufficient key results for those. In addition to that, there's a litmus test on the Google OKR playbook, also on whatmatters.com. And there's some really interesting ones here. So if you write your objectives and key results in each one in less than 5 minutes, that's really not a good sign, because there's supposed to be a level of collaboration. I just can't write mine in isolation of Steve. There would be some collaboration between us. If you can't really outline very quickly in just one line what it is, maybe it's not sharp enough. If it's just written in internal team terms, we're not kind of thinking from the outside in, from the customer and the market inwards. If all the targeted key result dates are actually at the last day of the quarter, it's like, so we can kind of declare all the way through the quarter that we're on track because all the dates are in the last. It's kind of like finishing all the work on the last day of a sprint, finish all the work on the last day of a quarter. Having basically, if you have unambiguous objectives, that really helps. That makes it much better. And it's important as well to make sure that team activities are if team activities are excluded, that would not be a good thing. For example, last night when I was doing my draft OKRs that I was going to show you today, there were some things that weren't included that I actually do that are really important to me, but they weren't in there. So I was like, what am I doing? Well, they need to be in there as well. And then I would say as well that team key results, they need to support the team of team key results. So you need to have peer teams supporting each other, but also supporting the hierarchy as well in two directions. So what I'd like to show you now would be some examples of those before I come back to some of the kind of upsides and downsides of objectives and key results. So I'm going to go to my screen now and just share my screen. So if I just bring up my own results. So hopefully you can see on my screen now my key results. If you want to get to this, it's basically bit.ly / John C. OKR. So capital J, capital C, capital O, capital K, capital R, and small s. And so I have my OKRs here. And so what you'll notice here is I have a Kanban guide website, kanbanguides.org. And at the moment, some of the key results that I have in for that are updating the main guide and announcing that in June. That's going pretty okay in terms of what level of stretch there is. I think it should be okay. So you can see the blue dots are far to the right. So that's kind of interesting where you're showing, okay, is it a committed or aspirational result? It's a committed one. But if something is committed and the level of stretch is high, that may be good, it might be bad, but it kind of gives you a sense check of where you are. I need to do some blogging about that particular guide. I need to update one of the addendums. That's a bit of an aspiration to do that in June, but definitely updating the Cynefin piece, the complexity piece, getting that done in July. It's still an aspiration, but it's still something I'm going to strive for. Something I'm really struggling with because I haven't plugged in with Steve, who's here with us, is wouldn't it be nice to add some more Tameflow content to the implementation details addendum, in particular about throughput accounting, because it's mostly Kanban oriented at the moment. So so that's red because I haven't collaborated, and this is a draft one. So before this could be agreed, I would need to tie in with Steve, and Steve might say, no, that doesn't tie in with his timeline. He's got other priorities going on, so that's fine. I say, okay, well, maybe we won't be doing it in this quarter then. Publishing the new guide as well in July, the complexity guide. And so you can see here, overall, you've got the objective on the left. You've got some key results. Who owns those? What's the team? So product, marketing, personal, or whatever. The traffic light color is based on how I feel it's going. Some status text, and whether it's committed or aspirational. So really, really key. And by the way, this is on a website called coda.io. You can see the URL at the top. I'll share it in the comments after I present. And essentially, I've shared this so people can review this, and you can even, from this website, can even get it where you can edit and comment on my OKRs as well. So it's a really nice little website. They also have free Google Sheets there where you can work on those. Some other objectives and key results that I have. So writing a book. Curious about the critique that you have about some of these key results. Are they really the right key results? So one of them for me is like, if I could write 2 hours every day, I just know what I'm like. I work better in the morning. So maybe working on writing between 5 and 7 a.m. would work better. I get up early anyway. Is that really an outcome? Is the exam question. Finding a willing publisher who isn't going to take the IP rights away from me. Signing up maybe a couple of CEOs to add a bit of credibility for that book. So those 2 are red because I haven't even started talking to those. In fact, they're all red. So that's something that I should really challenge. Is this something that really I can achieve? But I think it's nice to aim for it. But I'm saying at the moment it's committed, but like, what am I doing? So maybe I need to collaborate with my colleagues and see what the reality of that is. Lots of other ones as well, like losing weight, losing 20 kgs. Maybe if I could do a bit of yoga, if I could start running again. I used to do lots of running, maybe sign up for another half marathon. You can see they're all challenged as well. And then maybe hiring some of my teenagers to do some work with me on SEO optimization and the website and so on. And my dad died a couple of months ago, so could be he was writing a book. Can we get that published? So some activities in there as well, and also have a community for potential PSTs. Can I get maybe 3 PSTs by the end of the year? So these are my objectives and key results. I wanted to show you some examples. I'm not saying they're the best examples. I'll share the URL when Steve starts talking and presenting, so you can have a look at these yourselves as well. I just wanted to give you an example, so it wasn't just pure theory, just showing you on the flip chart. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the flip chart now. Okay, so let me just switch back to flip chart. So going to go back to some of the pros and cons of objectives and key results. So some of the things that I thought really when I was going through this is I think OKRs are dangerous in the wrong hands. If you have people who are treating OKRs as the new KPIs, the new management by objectives, I think we're barking up the wrong tree. So we might have to do a bit of work with people to understand that we're not about arbitrary targets. We're not about tying compensation to the key results. We can have some indirect links, of course, but it shouldn't be a direct thing that we don't meet our results because we're stretching and then we're affected in terms of our compensation, because that will drive gaming in terms of people trying to pretend they've overachieved when really they haven't stretched at all. But some of the things that I like that it gives us some focus. But what I would do is the danger that I see here is with OKRs from a Cynefin point of view. I think it's kind of taking a kind of a complicated or a clear approach to the work that we're doing. It's like we know what we don't know, and I'm not so sure about dealing with the stuff that we don't know, the stuff we don't even know we don't know. So I would encourage the use of multiple and competing experiments, so we're not trying to back one horse and pretending that a horse is winning when actually maybe if you ran 4 horses, metaphorically, that we might discover that one of them is better. One of them that we didn't expect actually was better. So in the true spirit of empiricism, while the focus is okay, the injection I would put in here would be to make sure we've got multiple and competing experiments. I like that there's alignment, but it shouldn't be at the expense of autonomy. So these OKRs should not be top-down only. They should be horizontal and they should be bi-directional. One of the things I would say as well in large-scale Scrum and in systems thinking, there's this the technique called system modeling or causal loop diagrams. And I think what would be really nice would be when you do your multi-level Kanban of all the different objectives and key results, it would be good to say, well, my objective over here is going to drive up your one over there. That's going to actually reduce this one over here. Will have a bit of a delayed effect. That one will drive this, but this one over here will have a delayed effect in improving this. And I think if we did a bit of system modeling, I wouldn't treat it mathematically or anything like that, but if we did some social exercise to understand the potential consequences, the potential unintended consequences of some of our OKRs, I think that'd be very good. So if I was to collaborate with Steve later doing some kind of system model, I think it'd be good to kind of tease out some of the flaws in some of the objectives and key results that I have listed at the moment. One of the things that's encouraged in objectives and key results is the idea of check-in. So they kind of de-emphasize the whole idea of annual performance review. You can still have it, but it's kind of de-emphasized. So the check-in, the regular check-in in terms of how we're doing. One of the things I don't like about OKRs is I don't hear people saying this, but I get the smell of really big bets. And with agility, the more agile you get, the smaller the bets you really should be making. It's okay to take big bets, but you can win big, but you can lose big. So do you really want to bet the company, the organization? So I'd encourage as an injection here to offset that potential side effect would be to have smaller bets rather than really big bets. I've already talked about not tying it to the compensation system directly. From an agility point of view, I would discourage the use of individual OKRs for people who are members of agile teams because we're just going to cause conflict. So I don't have an issue with team OKRs, team OKRs, multi-level OKRs, but if it's to do with an individual within a team, that will cause problems. And the other thing as well is if you're spending 3 months just putting together your annual strategic plan at the moment, and we know already, of course, when we finish it that it's not true, you might need to kind of pull back the lever a little bit on that, so we have less certainty in terms of annual strategic plan, and we start moving over to a kind of a quarterly based rhythm with a weekly check-in in terms of how we're doing against those, so kind of de-emphasizing the whole idea of an annual strategic plan. So that's just a very quick overview of objectives and key results. I hope you found that useful. And I'm now going to have a look at your comments and check in with Steve and see what Steve thinks of what I've said there. Is there anything that he disagrees, maybe, or maybe Steve can top and tail some of the presentation as well. Thank you for that. Okay, welcome back, Steve.
Yes, well, yes, there was a surprise there for me, right? So I am at the other end of the dependency arrow, but sure, we will work it out and see that the like the throughput accounting elements and factors of Tameflow and the theory of constraints find a good placement in the work that you are doing, which, by the way, is really excellent, tying together so many different ideas and like schools of thoughts. I think what you're doing reminds me a lot of what I have been doing with Tameflow, even though my approach was like inspired differently, because, as you know, I've been working with patterns and pattern theory, but basically the essence is that of cherry picking what works and exactly. And find the right, like the alchemy, creating the new gold that will resolve exactly. All problems. So I like that. Regarding what you said about the OKRs, I think it's all spot on. There are a few things which are good caveats, like it's dangerous in the wrong hands, but that's true for any powerful tool. Anything that can cause great changes in an organization, in a company, is obviously can also be like misused and abused. And we know that there are many company leaders and CEOs there that are probably more on the psychopathic side than anything else. So give them a tool like that, and they might create even more damage than what they are usually doing. So let's be careful with that.
Indeed.
The other thing that I took notice is like the you said something like the smell of the big something. So it's not like
big bang.
Yeah, big bang. Yeah, that's also very, very relevant, especially if top management is used to let's say the old McKinsey model of current state and future state, and you design a big change and then you execute. But there we need to make some distinctions. Kanban talks a lot about evolutionary change, And I think that is a valid approach, but evolutionary change without direction is a bit going around on a random path. So OKRs on top of evolutionary change can give the right kind of direction. It's like a guidance to the evolutionary change. Likewise, when you mentioned alignment and autonomy, autonomy does not mean anarchy, as most people tend to understand it. They understand it as, oh, we can do whatever we want because we are autonomous. No, it means that you have a certain degree of freedom in taking operational decisions, but those decisions have to be aligned with wherever the company is going. So the strategic view of the company must be reflected in the like the results of the decisions that are taken autonomously on the field. And here I think that the OKR can help. They are the right kind of tool to connect like the top to the bottom and get that alignment across the board, but still leaving the space of autonomic decisions at the low levels and intermediary levels as well. What else? You said about limiting work in process and focus. Well, I mean that's really the essence of Tameflow and theory of constraints. And as I will show you now, one idea is, well, how can you limit the work in process or the extent to an OKR exercise? Because the risk is that people might get very excited with these OKRs and they start drawing boxes and boxes, and the hierarchy of this tree becomes so huge that, oh dear, they might have to change their building, go into new offices, so they find a wall large enough to represent this tree. So obviously that's not how OKRs should work. They should be limited. So how can you limit them? One way, and that's my proposal to you today, one part of it, is to become very rigorous in the thinking, in the logic, in the deep thinking behind the OKRs. And you said something very significant as well, one of the anti-patterns. Now, if you just spend a few minutes on defining the OKR, it's probably not worth it. An OKR, a node in an OKR tree needs to be elaborated. It needs to be put in context to all other elements, because there are dependencies, and not only dependencies, but there are causes and effects. When something happens, it might trigger a cascade of effects. So that is something that I don't mean to say that you need to design and do like a big upfront design and you go back to waterfall and so on, but you need to be aware of how things interrelate. The more you gain clarity in the relationships between these elements, the better. And you said very well that the creation of an OKR tree is a collaborative effort. So you have interaction between the people involved in the OKRs. And I would go so far as to say that any node in the OKR must be defined by, going back to my terminology, those who have their span of control surrounding the object of that element, whilst those that are in the sphere of influence will take care of the nodes that are higher up in the hierarchy or in the next node in the network. So that's what I would say. One other point, which if you allow me to like comment on your OKR table, I did not see, in my opinion, a sufficient element of quantification, because I think with that one very important thing is that the key result, without something that can be measured or something that can be observed, even if you're committed, might still remain in the aspirational part. So it's very important, especially when you come to an organization. Now you are yourself, so you are in charge of yourself. You can drive and push yourself as you best wish. But when you are in a context of an organization with many people, having numbers or observable effects becomes of essence, and it becomes really important to have them clarified. And this is also something I go into. Yeah.
Steve, there are a few comments on the drive. Do you mind if I go through some of the comments?
Let's see. Yes, I love comments.
Yeah, so there's quite a few actually. So Jersey, hello, how are you doing? Daniel is here as well. Hi from Montreal. Srikant's got a few comments. Olaf from Toronto. Jersey, Warsaw beats Montreal and Toronto. Jitesh, I know Jitesh from Lloyd's. Hi, Jitesh, how are you doing? Srikant has got a few here. So OKRs implemented poorly in several organizations as performance tracking systems. Totally agree, and it's a real red flag for me when I see that. While I can understand there can be some kind of link to them, if, for example, people are hitting their key results, for example, for those objectives, but the behavior is really bad, what does that say? And also, I think if you tie to the compensation system too much as well, we end up with basically not going for stretch, which is kind of not what we're going for. Remember what John Doerr said, if all our OKRs are green, they're bad. And so Srikant continues, essentially it's a system to make sure that experiments are aligned to objectives continuously. I agree, thank you. Jitesh, what problem are we trying to solve with OKRs? It's a good question, actually. I think people are trying to find the 21st century approach to measuring success, and I'm not sure anybody's really kind of cracked that properly. Although Steve might have, maybe he'll tell us in the story. But I did a big case study on measurement over a couple of years, and I kind of came to the conclusion that really, if you're trying to measure the success of agility, you're probably better trying to figure out how inspired people are. And I'm not sure if OKR solves that problem. At the same time, we've got lots of companies who are quoted in the stock exchange. They have, I don't want to say the word targets because we don't have but they have objectives that they're trying to achieve to meet market expectations and so on. So I guess it's kind of a halfway house, Jitesh. That's just my own John Foreman answer. If anybody else got a better answer, just let me know. Srikant, alignment to work done to overarching goals, absolutely. And then measured against expected key, absolutely, yeah, totally. Jersey came in again. Calling up to Jitesh, we want to have a tool for flexible objective management for the whole company. That's important, actually. That I think another mistake that a lot of organizations make is they have these objectives and key results, but they kind of lose the plot, and we end up with lots of files all over the place on drives and SharePoint folders and all that, and nobody can find them anywhere. And so you lose the transparency. So I love the idea of some kind of a multi-level Kanban where everybody can kind of see everything, and where you can challenge if for example, Steve is depending on me or I'm depending on Steve, that we have to resolve that, or actually I have to reset my expectations that no, I might as well be smoking marijuana as I expect Steve to help me in the next quarter because Steve's got other priorities. Jadesh came in again. So what are the unintended consequences of using OKRs the wrong way? Time to compensation, massive bets, not really thinking about that, basically thinking that work is plannable, because some of our work, complex work is essentially unplannable. It's like smoke and mirrors saying you're going to have something done by the end of the year when actually there's a lot unknown, so a lot of experimentation and so on. So real danger with people thinking that we're so dead sure. But what I like about Google's approach is they split committed OKRs from aspirational ones, so that at least reduces the pain a little bit. Jersey's come back again. So OKR is a tool to help solve problems like lack of focus, lack of alignment. Yes, I think so. Jitesh is saying thank you. And Srikant says lack of meeting the objectives. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm missing the stream. Maybe it was in. And you sent some links as well, Srikant. Thank you for that. If you want to come on camera, by the way, if anybody wants to come on camera, bit.ly/Steve Tendon 2, capital S, capital T. Yeah, so Srikant is giving us some URLs, but the URLs are blocked, I think, because I think I changed that setting in case somebody would bomb us with URLs, but I can try to add them later on. Another question from Jitesh. How difficult is it to adopt OKRs in large organizations? How do I get started? I did another live stream a couple of weeks ago where I'm doing agility within a function. And as they say in Ireland, you say, if someone's acting as a direction, you'd say, well, I wouldn't start here. But that's where I am. That's where I started in the function. So what I'm doing is I'm reaching out into the other functions that we collaborate with. And I think collaboration is key. Some of the objectives will come down from on high, but what's important is to um, try to remind people that they're bidirectional, they're horizontal and vertical, and maybe start small and try to lead by example by doing them really well within your sphere of influence. Steve, do you have any comments on Jitesh's question there? Is that how difficult is it to adopt OKRs in large organizations? How do I get started? Do you have any other suggestions on that one?
Well, I would relate this to how I go about with the Tameflow transformation, which I believe could inspire anyone who's doing like the adoption of OKRs. I mentioned before that one risk is that you go overboard and you start filling out all walls with these ever expanding trees, and then you need to call a gardener to keep it pruned. That is not the best way. In Tameflow, I always start from the very top, from the CEO, and I follow a slice down to some people who are actually doing the work. So it's not like start with a team level Scrum and then you expand. It's not like Lean. You start with a big plan at the top and then you roll it out through the entire organization. You bring in armies of consultants and it becomes like a huge like D-Day kind of thing. So I try to figure out what is the minimum slice breadth, so to say, that is completely horizontal from top to bottom,
Yeah.
and start working with that. And then I have something to say about another question that was asked about KPIs and so. But I maybe when I get the screen share with the Miro board, I will be more effective in explaining
Okay.
that. So I'll get back to that before I start my part of the
Thank,
presentation.
thank you, Steve. I've got more comments here as well. So Marcello, I think I pronounced it. The G is a capital G, Marcello. So Google OKR playbook bit.ly/ capital G at the start of Google, and then the rest of the URL is okay. Um, Srikant, it is top down, so I need to start from the top and clear understanding. I'm not sure if I agree with that, Srikant. I re-listened to John Doerr's book over the last few days as part of the research for this, and he was emphatic about it being top down and bottom up and horizontal. But I agree, I see it done top down quite a lot, which is one of the kind of anti patterns that I've noticed. Um, and another comment from Srikant as well. And practice of this tool as is meant to be practiced. So I'm trying to follow the flow here. It's top down, so most of the system and practices of this tool is meant to be practiced. I don't follow the last point, Srikant, but I'll come back to you on that one. Srikant has been very helpful with the URL. It's bit.ly/ Google, capital G, capital O, capital K, capital R, playbook, capital P, capital B, for playbook. Okay, Srikant, cherry picking with biases that we have. Yeah, absolutely. I accept that. We all have mental models, don't we? And we live and learn, and absolutely, there's no doubt about that. So uh, we need to use some tricks to try and unpick that, and so that's where the collaborative review as well of what we're doing matters. And for me, it's not so much about picking the right tools in the market; it's understanding the context that I'm in, understanding the work, and then understanding what's appropriate, and then I look at what might be appropriate. But I don't make the decision. I would show the teams and teams of teams the options, and then they would decide which ones they actually went for. But thank you for that point, Srikant. I agree with your point. Angela Chitu. So, hi, John. Can we have individual OKRs for personal development in the Agile team? Yeah, that I don't have a problem with. I think that'll be fine. I think what I have a problem with is when we have kind of delivery oriented objectives for individuals within Scrum teams, for example. Within a Scrum team, you're supposed to have a self-organizing team and all that kind of stuff, and you could have competing, but not even with Scrum, any kind of agile team as such. If you have kind of competing objectives, there's a danger of competing objectives if we kind of treat it as a top-down management by objectives, just a new way of just lipstick on a pig, basically. But I think the personal development would be absolutely fine. Srikant's got loads more comments. I'm trying to keep up, Srikant. Probably better if you came on camera. If the team has a goal, then the OKRs for the team. I agree. As I said earlier, it's not a personal evaluation tool. Yeah, I agree. It's not a KPI. I agree. And it is a trend indicator. Yes, I agree. Yeah, it'd definitely be easier to come on camera as you can because there's got loads of comments. But thank you so much for your engagement. I really, really appreciate that. Frederick has a comment. Can it be a good option to start using OKRs for ourselves before using it with a team? Does it help with the learning curve? I can tell you, Frederick, I had some aha moments when I started playing around with these for myself. It kind of explained why things weren't happening for me in my personal life. So yeah, I think it'd be good to check it out. I agree. There's a question being asked by Srikant, but I don't understand. Srikant, if you could come on camera or clarify. So what will you align to? I guess maybe Steve might be talking about the goal later on when we talk about the Tameflow aspect.
Yeah.
So maybe that will be addressed then, Srikant. Frederick has another one. Maybe your own vision. Not sure alignment would be the highest benefit. Focus might be instead. Sometimes when you got multiple teams working together, if you need to kind of, sometimes I'm not saying alignment is the be all and end all. I reviewed all the scaling patterns that I was aware of in 2018, and if alignment was really important to you, then some of them came up top, and if autonomy was important, others came on top, and then if you wanted both, others came up on top. It depends on your context what's important to you. I think what's important though is that we're not kind of running all in completely different directions. That makes sense. I hope that addresses your question, Frederick. Jitesh has an interesting comment there, and I think I'd like to hear your comments, Steve, on Jitesh's comment here. I like the span of control awareness. OKRs are usually outside of teams, departments, business units, span of control, and used top-down as targets. Have you seen that as well, Steve?
So of course, no. This is strongly tied to what the mental models, to what mental models are populating the mind of the CEO. If the CEO has like, if you're familiar with the organizational development model of Frederic Laloux, where you have different stages of organizational development throughout history, and you start like with the army, and then you have like the achievement phase, and then you have like the green familiar environment. And one thing that he said was that an organization will not be able to evolve beyond the level of development of the CEO, and I totally agree with that. So that's one thing to start with, to understand how far can it go, not because it's lacking capacity and potential, but because the top guy will not allow that development to happen, not because he's a bad guy, but because his mental models prevent him from seeing better ways. So with that caveat, if you have a CEO that is attuned to the nature of knowledge work and understands that it is all about experimentation, inspect and adapt, iterations, interactions, increments, and so on and so forth, he will also understand that the people who can take the best decisions are those that have the knowledge. That's the essence of knowledge work, that you at the top, you do not know how to do the work. It's a different thing in a manufacturing plant. Even Henry Ford could go on the plant and show how to tighten a nut or a bolt. It's not like that in knowledge work. So knowledge work, the notion of delegation is center to the well functioning of the team. And therefore, to get to the question of Jitesh, the people who have the span of control should be developing that level, that node of the OKR tree. And then the fact that we want to create the alignment, well, that goes deep into what Tameflow is about, how you can create this unity of purpose, as I call it. There are certainly failure patterns, anti-patterns of OKRs where this autonomy is given, but lacking the unity of purpose, that alignment doesn't happen. So people might create OKRs which are good in and by themselves at that level, but they go in one direction while the company wants to go in another direction, and of course that is going to create at least some friction, if not worse.
Thank you very much. Don Miller, hi Don, how you doing? Thank you, regular fan from Cincinnati. And Jitesh is saying thank you. Thank you, Jitesh. Jersey, John, in my table, bloggable updates of the key result, it looks like to be an action. Can you explain why your opinion is it a key result and not an action? I think you could debate that, and I agree, and I'm glad that you've noticed that, because essentially what's really, really important is that as many of our objectives as possible are outcomes as opposed to activities or outputs. You could argue that's just an output. It could be a leading indicator to depending on how the blog is going and what kind of feedback you get in terms of what kind of reaction before you publish. It could be a way of kind of de-risking what you're going to publish so you can get a reaction. Sometimes a lot of book authors publish on Medium before they publish the book itself, so they can kind of de-risk. So if value is not just about customer end user value, but also about knowledge value, acquiring knowledge about what's acceptable to the market, it can be valuable. But yeah, I take your point, Jersey. Thank you for that. Matthew has a question here. How do we know we're all aligned and all the way? I'm going to defer that question to later on, maybe in Steve's presentation, because we're going to be talking about what might happen in the Tameflow world. How could that actually happen? So I hope you're okay with that, Matthew, coming back to that later. And Rudiger, regular on the show as well. Thank you, Rudiger, for coming. I tagged this several months ago. It seems to be a great summary of the tool vendor. Search Google for Purdue.com, I think, and the ultimate OKR guide. Thank you very much for that tip, Rudiger. I think everybody will be checking that out. You can see Shrikant is in the lobby as well to join us shortly, so I'll be with you shortly, Shrikant. And yeah, I've got the video link already. Matthew's got another question. Back to the anti-pattern, how do we pivot when we have multiple objectives and have cascaded midway through the planned dates? How do we yeah, it is tricky. So basically what's one of the things that John Doerr says is that when you have some objectives that you miss for whatever reason, because we got sometimes you got unknowns, you don't know what's going to come up, so you have to kind of pivot during the quarter. What John Doerr was recommending was that you don't just cancel the objective completely, that you push it out to another quarter, so you keep the focus on it, unless of course you decide as an organization that you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe Steve, maybe we might come back to Matthew's two comments at the end of your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And then we've got a few more. There's a lot of comments coming in. It's really good. Those successful companies aren't successful because they use OKRs. I agree with you. They use OKRs because they're designed to leverage the empowered. Yeah, I agree. So this is why I put a lot of health warnings around the OKRs. Yeah, the cause and effect isn't. I don't see it directly there either. Thank you for that. Shrikant, depends. There are several ways to empower teams, OKR being one of them. Loads more comments than Shrikant, but I will bring Shrikant on video shortly. You can do it with OKRs too if you know how, absolutely. I think Steve might show us a way, and depends what product and teams are. Just three more comments. We're going to switch over to Shrikant before we go to your presentation, Steve, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we've got a comment from John Yo, I think, as I pronounce your name properly, John. Hi, Steve. Something you said earlier was really interesting, that Jeff Sutherland got it wrong to wrap the work around the time box like sprint length. Can you kindly elaborate, as this is core to Scrum? You take that one, Steve?
Yes, though we would go off topic because it's not an OKR thing. This was
Okay.
something I said yesterday in my webinar. I don't know. Shall we leave this? I mean, I can suggest either you look what I said yesterday. There I touched upon this,
Yeah.
or we do a short detour and I will scribble a few things on the whiteboard, or we leave it till later.
Yeah, we can, John, if you're okay with it. If you, I'll leave. But basically, you can use Steve's Twitter tag, and maybe if you get connected at Tendon, and then if you do a direct message to Steve, and maybe try to sort it out later on. Thank you, John. Uh,
Yeah.
Rudiger has another one as well. It seems many orgs are not designed with product-centric view of the world. Yeah, I see a lot of project-centric organizations. But I would also say, Rudiger, that I'm not sure product-centric is necessarily utopia either. I'm kind of wondering if customer jobs to be done kind of even goes beyond product, because sometimes you get these ideas coming into a product group and they get bounced because they don't tie the agenda of the product group, and actually it might be a brilliant idea, it might be an unmet need by a customer, or we're not actually dealing with that. But yeah, I totally with you. That's
Actually, on this, I think I disagree with this like worldview of differences between project and the product world. Even
yeah,
though I have written in the first book, in the hyper book, that the product focus gives another kind of um, quality to the team. But looking at this with like the deeper patterns lens, it's not so much the product or the project or the job to be done that creates that quality. It is like the dedication to a goal. That is the point. If you get the teams to stand behind a shared goal, whether that takes the shape of a project or a product or a customer focus job to be done, is secondary. I mean, we got the Apollo that put the man on the moon, and that was a project. And I don't think that the people there were not engaged. They were probably overexcited to do that. So it's really about having a goal, maybe an ambitious goal, but having something that excites people and get them to be really engaged in what they are doing.
I think in terms of the moonshot, I think that was long term. It wasn't a few months, it was like a few years. So it's, I guess really it's more about the stable teams and dynamic reteaming and all that. Very keen to hear more later in your presentation how you deal with that, Steve. But I think I kind of generally agree with greater goal is probably an even better way of putting it. But having teams that are changing all the time is not very healthy for delivery, basically. So there are a number
But
of
that's another problem. I mean, that's not product focus. And the stability of team is beneficial for the stability of the system, which is beneficial for the predictability and the forecasting and limitation of work in process. You can have stable teams and projects. They are not contradictory. They are orthogonal. You could also have product focus, and typically when companies are transitioning from old-fashioned project world to contemporary modern product world, they might say we are product focused, but they keep on flipping teams or expanding teams, or even worse, they might aspire to have stable teams, but because they don't have control on the constraint, they maybe they're using the Kanban board, and it's a portfolio thing, so there are many Kanban boards. They will get like the feeling that, oh, we have a problem in this product line, in this product stream, in this value stream, because there is a constraint there. It's not a constraint. It's a false constraint. So what do? They start moving resources around to address their capacity problem. So even though they aspire to have stable teams, the reality they see, not the reality of what it is, but the reality they see, will make them break the stability of the teams. So it's very subtle. Now again, it's a matter of lenses and mental models, how you perceive the reality you are immersed in, and how that perception triggers decisions that might even go against your aspirations or your goals.
I disagree, Steve, but that's okay. I see lots of projects set up as artificial constructs to put teams together because that's how they get money. And then you have a team after 8 months and they get disbanded because the project has ended. And I think that's really sad. But let's not dive into it here. Let's just disagree on this particular matter. I've got a couple of more comments coming in. Marcello, come back, great chat, thanks. I got to run to work. Okay, have a great weekend. And I think it's time to bring in Srikant now because I see another comment as well from Srikant. He's probably going to follow up on what we said. Whether product or project is the ability to quickly prioritize, experiment, and validate value delivery. Thank you, Srikant. And Rudiger, so it is about alignment. Okay, I'm not sure what you meant by that, Rudiger. So I'm going to bring Srikant in now at this stage, if that's okay, Steve, and then we can do the presentation.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Hello, guys.
Srikant, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Hello.
Joining.
Hey, Steve. So unfortunately, I have a hard stop in 4 minutes. I'm signed up for another meeting at 9 o'clock here. So thank you for having me. Actually, I got up at 4:30 this morning. I think there was a calendar mix-up on the meetup, which pointed out that this meeting was 2 or 3 hours earlier. So
I addressed all that already on the meetup. You're wasting your 3 minutes left.
So essentially, I don't know what we can talk about in 3 minutes, but OKR is one part of the toolkit that I use in the context of problem solving. So again, I look at models as multi-model in concept, and you want to address, based on context, a transdisciplinary approach to problem solving, and that's what I do. So, it's very consistent what I've seen so far since the morning around the use of OKRs. And the only thing is it's poorly practiced in many organizations that I've been to, which is a common theme. But that's not true for OKRs alone. It is true for every kind of practices. Many of the practices are poorly practiced, like if you take Agile or Scrum or Kanban, or the practice of the art of a practice is really poor. And in combination of multiple practices being practiced poorly, the outcomes are often very poor. So that's what I see as a pattern.
Indeed, I think you give humans any game. You give them story points. You give them, you give them some rules. And the important thing is that if you force people to use a particular strategy, they'll find a way to do the minimum.
Yes.
So for me, is finding something that works with people's belief systems. You still want to stretch their belief system, but not be a million miles away from it. So when you turn your back, they'll just do something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a lifelong journey of trying to find an answer of how to get people to practice things when they're designed not to practice things, or like Dave Snowden talks about it, right? We are all, as humans, we're engineered to get away with the minimum utilization of calories. To get away with the minimum is what you're designed for. So within those constraints, how do we maximize value delivery and flow? That's really the question.
Thank you very much, Srikant. Do you have any other comments or questions?
No, not today. Unfortunately, I can't continue. I had to drop off for my next call. I was wishing, actually, this was 3 hours ago, so it really aligned with my time availability. So sorry about that. I'll try again in future meetings to jump in. And Steve, thank you. I'm still trying to read up on your Tameflow. I bought your book.
Thank you.
With you. I have some neurological challenges which don't allow me to read books. So I was chatting about your audio version of the book, or asking you for one some time back.
Oh, you were the one that asked me for the audiobook?
Yes, I can't read all right. So that's my problem. So therefore, it's not I can't. I want to and unable to. Let's put it that way. So reading and writing are not some of my abilities. So. But
we'll try to get an audio version of the book as well.
So John Dewar and the audiobook I caught up a long time back. I started practicing Tameflow. I'm yet to get to it, but I'm looking forward to it sometime.
Okay.
And thank
Okay.
you for having me. I will definitely jump in for a more detailed discussion one of these days, next time you do a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Srikant. And
Thank
sorry.
you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye then.
Bye.
All right, Steve. So I guess we're ready for your presentation now, if that's okay. We've got John
Yes.
to wax off.
So, my screen share is on
Yeah.
there, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, referring to that question about Scrum and knowledge work, I did talk about that in my webinar, and just want to take this opportunity to remind that even this evening there will be an episode. You have it on YouTube with the YouTube URL you see there. More in general, if you go to tameflow.com/campfire, you can get like the signups for the whole calendar, and anytime I'll do one of these, you will be notified. So let's see what we can start with. I have something prepared, but before going into that, I want to comment on the KPI and alignment thing. So let's just assume that we are having a classical like hierarchy in the organizational sense, and we know that in these organizations we will have different silos within which we have different KPIs. So maybe if this is the tech organization, one thing you're looking at is maybe velocity, just to use a term we can relate to. If this is like the accounting, they might be looking at ROI. If this is sales, they will be interested in commissions. So these are all numbers, but the point is these numbers are obviously not consistent. They are all in conflict with one another. The breakthrough that you will get by understanding the key notions of theory of constraints and Tameflow is that we will simply discard these kinds of numbers, and we will consider only throughput in the financial sense, financial throughput across all lines. So there is like one number that will be used across the board, and therefore whatever improves that number in one silo will also improve that number overall for everyone else. Excuse me. Excuse me, I had one of my coughing attacks. Everything is under control again, I hope. So, where does this leave us with respect to OKRs? OKRs are good because they create the communication from top to bottom and even across, as we said. But one weakness is that they do not address these KPIs or numbers that are different in the various departments and silos. If we can get beyond that, then we will be in a great shape to use and, so to say, take more advantage of what KPIs have to offer us. So I will just clean this up and then start with what I had in mind. So OKRs are a great way of bringing about large organizational change, primarily in mindset, because everything is related to one another. But I see OKRs as an entry point onto which we can add or layer or extend things that come from the theory of constraints. Now, I will always repeat that part in red, where the goal, as expressed by Goldratt, is to make money today and in the future. The today is the operational part. It is exactly what you are concerned about with Scrum and Kanban and the value streams. It's the doing of the stuff that needs to be done. But that second part, in the future, means that it is forward-looking. It means that you are trying to prepare. Now, this is not a big upfront design and waterfall where you're trying to plan something that cannot be planned. We are in the knowledge work domain, and in knowledge work, planning is just impossible. But that does not mean that you are forced to go blindfold. I mean, we are having roadmaps and other tools to try to anticipate the future, and even more, to shape the future. So that is not the operational flow, but it is the flow of initiatives. And OKRs are exactly that. They are visualizing or making evident, they are helping people to articulate the large-scale initiatives that all should concur to accompany objective. So the OKRs are what we can use to start working on that second part of Goldratt's statement, to make money in the future. And Goldratt has addressed this with his thinking processes. There are many aspects and elements in the thinking processes. We will look briefly on the goal tree and the strategy and tactics trees. The elements of the thinking processes started off with current reality, future reality, negative branch resolution, and other like day-to-day trees. But what is mostly resembling the OKR world is the goal tree, and also, as we'll see today, it can be enhanced with the strategy and tactics trees. One point that we should also keep in mind, even though I will not explain it in today's presentation, is this notion of levels of disagreement. Goldratt was very keen on getting all people on board, and always wanted to understand if there was agreement on the problems that should be solved, agreement on the solution to the problem, and agreement on the implementation of the solution. Now, these three elements, problem, solution, implementation, are obviously things that sort of relate to what we're trying to do with the OKRs. And when there is disagreement, the technique of the evaporating cloud is prominent to resolve these conflicts of view. These are all very important elements, but we will not go into them. But I need to mention them so that you are aware that there are further pieces to the puzzle. So if that was TOC, the last part is what comes from Tameflow. And in Tameflow, I focus primarily on patterns, on pattern languages, pattern forms, pattern theories, and I create like patterns-based transformations. And in order to do that, I use something that I call the pattern canvas. We will see an example of a canvas which, though, relates to the strategy and tactics trees. So I developed the concept like around the strategy and tactics trees, and then enhanced it and developed it further for the patterns. So let's start by looking at the goal tree. And I just need to flip page on my tablet so I can maneuver this. So goal tree. I will take an example from my book, which is the third proto pattern. At the end of the book, I'm listing some 20 odd, I call them proto patterns. So it's like almost a pattern, but it gives you an idea of what you should do. And this one, it's the third one, says that you have to create a goal tree. A goal tree defines some relationships based on the notion of necessity logic. It means that we can read these trees with a complete sentence. Any upper node in the tree is connected to the lower one by saying, in order to deliver what we promise, we must be predictable. So I was basically reading off this part of the tree. It is a necessity logic. So if we want to be predictable, we will also have to limit work in process. To be predictable, we need to improve flow efficiency. The goal tree is also typically distinguished between critical success factors. These are a few. They might be the top level, most important things that C-level execs or department units have as their objective. And then a number of necessary conditions. Notice that we don't speak about key results. We speak about necessary conditions, which we want to achieve in order to achieve what is on top, and so on and so forth, until we get to the very, very top. And here, let's remember again, Goldratt was saying we need to make money now in the future. And for that reason, I have defined in this goal tree, but a goal tree is something that every company has to develop on their own. So don't cut and paste this. You could, if it is consistent with what you're trying to achieve, but the goal tree should be developed autonomously. But if you look at this, the now is the stability part, and the future is the growth part. So the now, the stability is the flow of operations, the flow of work, the flow of value through the company, and the growth part is the flow of initiatives, those that you would define at a strategic level. So the goal tree is effectively a strategic tool, but then we come to the strategy and tactics trees of the theory of constraints. These trees will remind you of the OKR tree. In fact, I say that you could take an OKR tree and elaborate it and turn it into a strategy and tactics tree. Goldratt had a very operational, pragmatic way of defining strategy and tactic. It's unlike many management scholars who come up with all sorts of theory of what is strategy and what is tactic. For Goldratt, it was very simple. It looked like this. Strategy is what to do, tactic is how. But when you're talking about how, maybe it is a bit more difficult. So what you're thinking to do might not be sufficient. Maybe something is missing, and that's when you start to break things down into let's say actions or steps. Now, note well, we know that the OKRs do not contain actions and steps, but the connection is clear, because anytime you have to perform an action, the first thing you will be concerned about is, what is it? What is that? So we're connecting that step with a question. What is that? And once you start defining what that is, you can come up to a how. You notice something? We are starting to build a recursive structure here. The tactic of one level, like this one, becomes the strategy of the next level. This is also similar to OKRs, where the key results of one level become the objective of the lower level. So we have something that is very similar in structure. And of course, this reasoning can go on node by node, so that at the end we end up maybe with a number of these nodes. Maybe some of these are at even lower levels, and at the end you will reach like the ultimate node, where things actually get done, where you have the people on the ground, and there work happens. So anything that is strategy will be broken down in tactics. Sorry about that. I'm still having my learning curve on selecting objects with Miro. So it will become a tactic, and eventually the things that we're thinking of become feasible, so you can do them. You get an action. Now, I said when commenting on John's introduction that one of the key elements is to limit work in process. That if you just, as John said, if you just dedicate 5 minutes to develop a node in the OKR tree, probably it's not elaborate enough. And one way to limit the extent to the OKR is to be very rigorous on defining what we accept as a valid node. And this is where I, within the context of the strategy and tactics trees, I introduce this canvas, and it relates to the basic questions that you have in goal trees and even the other trees of the theory of constraints. So the first one, what is the goal? What is it that we are trying to do? Basically this part up here. And then we want to elaborate on how are we actually doing this. So it's like the second part there. One is the strategy, the other one is the tactic. And we will then start asking some hard question. Why is this needed? What is in it for us? Maybe this is the distinction between like the committed and the ambitious, ambitional objective. Why are we getting ourselves into the trouble of doing this? What is in it for us? We need to articulate this very clearly, and we need to have agreement on this. Everyone at that level of the organization needs to agree that that is necessary. And by the way, if you're using throughput accounting or throughput metrics, reaching that agreement will be much easier. And then, of course, the moonshot or the pie in the sky. Is this possible? and we need to get the agreement that yes, we can. It is not only is it possible, but we can. We have the capacity, the ability, and the willingness to make it happen. It's not sufficient to say that yes, it is possible, but everyone is disengaged, so it will not happen in any way. And then we need to consider, how difficult is it? How hard will it be? The usual project management questions: when will it be done? How much will it cost? We must have these ideas articulated, even if not precisely, but in order to relate what we're doing to the other business initiatives. And then, now, is this sufficient? If it's not sufficient, then this node, as we saw on the previous slide, will be expanded into another what, how, and know in the strategy and tactics trees. Finally, I often add a section of schematics or diagrams so we can visualize what we're talking about. And then we have the last section, which is the most important one of all. What is the expected effect? Notice the wording again. We don't talk about result. We talk about an effect because in Goldratt's world, you're existing in a network of causes and effects. So if we do all these things that we have articulated in this canvas, we expect to see something. And this goes back to the result part of the OKR. The articulation of the expectation should be very clear and indisputable. So we want to have the expected effect to be measurable as a metric, as a number that we can measure. And again, if that number is a throughput number, you will get lots of agreement. Alternatively, if it's not measurable, we want it to be observable so that we can observe it. It could be the observing that there is a change in the behavior of some actor in the system or outside of the system. It means that we have impacted someone's life, and that impact is manifested through a change in behavior. So either measurable or observable. If we don't have this, I would say the whole exercise is a vanity exercise, because then we can just pat ourselves on the back and say, yes, we did it, but we cannot show that we did. So extremely important, maybe the most important part of everything. So if we put this together like recursively, always in terms of strategy and tactics trees, at the end, if you do this consistently for each and every node in the tree you're developing, you are basically developing a tree of canvases where the expected effects of the lower nodes will contribute their part to achieving the expected effect in the upper node. And I think we can leave it here and open up for more comments and discussions. John, are you there? We lost John. No, here he is.
Just try to click back on. Thank you.
So this is how I see how you can extend in with Tameflow. Actually here we've only done theory of constraints. I have not delved into Tameflow yet, but how you can extend the OKR thinking with the strategy and tactics thinking of the theory of constraints, and in particular with these let's call them strategy and tactics node canvases.
Thank you very much, Steve. A couple of comments came in. Rudiger has come in with a comment. A fantastic podcast on dependability. Search for Laz Allen, dependability at scale, Clark Ching, theory of constraints. So I'm familiar with Clark Ching. He's a popular guy in the theory of constraints world. By the way, Rudiger, I looked up Purdue.com. Thank you for that tip. Playing around with it at the moment. You can set up personal OKRs and company OKRs within Purdue, which kind of look kind of nice. I'm just curious, can we get the key results to be mapped horizontally as well? They look like they were kind of going down, but if anybody knows on the live stream, maybe do let us know. Thank you for that, Rudiger. Pradeep saying thanks, Rudy. So if anybody wants to come on camera at this point or wants to ask any questions, we'd be delighted to have you. It's bit.ly/Steve Tendon 2, capital S, capital T. And also just a reminder as well that there's an offer for the book. There was an offer last week. It was valid for 48 hours. It's now being rejuvenated. Thank you, Steve, for that. So people can get the book instead of $120, get it for $150. So the URL is tameflow.com/special-offer. In addition to that as well, there's a community for Tameflow. It's the community.tameflow.com. Steve, can people just sign up on that site? They can just register, right, and join?
They just go there and sign up. It's basically a discourse forum. So if you're familiar with discourse, you will find yourself at home.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you. I just got some comments coming in now. So Matthew, let's come back because remember we said we get back to Matthew with 2 questions earlier. So Matthew, thank you for coming back to us. Nice one, Steve. Thank you. Are you allowed to have multiple competing nodes?
Competing in what way? I mean, that's an interesting question. So the competition I would see as a consequence of these nodes being driven by different KPIs, and therefore I bring this back to the core notion of Tameflow that if you want to create a high-performing organization, first you have to weed out all the artificial conflicts that conventional management has created within the organization. And typically, all of these KPIs are a consequence of cost-based accountings. So replace cost-based accounting with throughput accounting, and I don't say that the conflicts disappear overnight, but you will have laid the foundation for eradicating them. The eradication might take a bit of work, and that's where you would resort to the thinking processes and the conflict resolution techniques that Goldratt developed with the evaporating cloud and the levels of disagreement and so on. So the answer there is that it's not a matter of being allowed to have multiple competing nodes. It's that in a normal organization, a standard organization, you will have competing nodes because that is the nature of the beast when it's based on cost accounting. If you want to move forward, look into throughput accounting.
Thank you, Steve. Jersey has a comment for Steve. Steve, would you please give us a practical example of what and how, and also the expected effect in example canvas?
So just relating to the proto patterns at the end of my book, I can just say, for instance, one of the very first ones is that you need to involve the CEO. Now, the CEO has to be on board. Why? Because we are acting in terms of vertical slices, and without the end point, there is no end. You cannot move forward or further. So if you express this as an expected effect, I would say that you have the CEO on board and he has explicitly articulated an agreement that he will be available to participating, to be an active actor in the transformation. So you're expecting a change in behavior of the CEO. That's probably more easy to say than to do, but it is one of the necessary conditions I see in order to get large-scale, fast, impactful transformations. And we can go on with many of these expected effects that induce a change in behavior, But then it becomes more interesting the more you go to the bottom of the organization, where things actually get done, because then things can be measured. So presumably one of the nodes will be like limit work in process. That's the what, and then you get the follow-up question: how do we do it? And you could say, well, number one, let's try shouting and telling the CEO that we need to work less. Doesn't work. Number two, let's try Scrum. Scrum gets you there with the velocity and the sprint. It is a way to limit work in process. Number three, you could try Kanban. You have column width limits. They have been designed for that purpose. Number four, you could have, of course, Tameflow with drum buffer rope scheduling, which is there to limit work in process. So we have four possible hows to respond to one what. And here we could even enhance that idea that you need to get agreement. When there is no agreement in the company, the next thing to do is, okay, let's run experiments. Maybe for 1 week or a period, a month, we tried number one. Then for another month, we try number two, number three, number four. And we measure which one gives the best expected effect. So we can, like, iteratively and experimentally develop the how. Of course, the why questions might be consequential. So is it difficult? Shouting is not difficult, but it's probably not effective. Using Scrum is not difficult at all. People would say yes. To do Scrum correctly is very difficult, but that's another topic, John. Maybe you have an opinion on that. But in principle, you can explain Scrum in 20 minutes. Kanban with with limits, it's easy in concept but difficult in practice. Tameflow is even more difficult in concept, but then when you start seeing how it actually works, it is pretty easy. So at the end, you would be measuring like your throughput, your operational throughput, and the expected effect of limiting working process is that throughput will increase. So unless you see that, your attempt at limiting working process have not worked out, or your hypothesis that limiting working process would increase throughput was not correct, and you work on that.
Thank you very much for that. I've got a few more comments from Matthew, but I'm going to go to Ian next. Ian Sharp. I worked with Ian in Baku. Welcome, Ian. Thank you for joining. So similar to the prior question, any advice on how to undertake the exercise of creating OKRs that cascade, but are also bidirectional horizontal? How is this agreement and alignment achieved? So Steve, I'm just going to give my answer, and then I think I actually know Ian's context. He actually does have a constraint. So a Tameflow answer would be very appropriate, I think, for Ian's situation. So Ian, one of the first things I would say is John Doerr recommends that you have a weekly check-in, that even if you have quarterly OKRs, with a weekly check-in, there'll be some kind of rhythm between team of teams, and then multiple functions or whatever your organization is structured. But ultimately, I think the secret sauce is making sure that your OKRs are transparent and some kind of map, like I was showing earlier on, where you had a kind of it looked like a cascade down, but actually the links were going across as well. It was like almost dependencies between different types of key results, objectives and key results as it was going down. And so I think really, if we can do all the synchronization in the world, but ultimately we need to enable people to search for the objectives and key results within the organization. So, for example, Steve can check on what I'm doing, and Steve might come to me and say, "What are you doing, John? You can't do that. So I need you to do this next month, and you don't even have it in yours. What are you doing?" So I think the key is opening up the books, making sure that we're maximizing transparency with our objectives and key results, so that then if you add a rhythm on top of that for synchronizing on that, but whether we're synchronizing, but we already have access to the information, so it kind of makes it a bit easier. Steve, I'm curious about your answer to Ian's question.
So, in terms of OKRs, given the nature of how OKRs are constructed, I think the only way to get to this horizontal bidirectional cascading effect is just to get people to talk. No interaction, face-to-face interaction, or yes, Zoom interaction, which has replaced face-to-face nowadays. But anyway, interacting with one another. And that's the only way. Why? Because typically when you cross the organizational boundaries, internal boundaries between departments and teams, you are crossing boundaries of silos, and those silos, as we said before, they have different KPIs. So at that point, it becomes a matter of negotiation. So at that point, it's a lot has to do with the, let's say, the psychological aspects and the power plays between the people or the bosses in these different departments. But basically, it is a negotiation, so it is an interaction. But if you, again, it's I know I'm a broken record, but that's my nature in this context. If you have like a one metric notion, and that it's throughput across the board, then a lot of these interdepartment negotiations would just literally evaporate, because they are already on the same boat, and the need is not there. To make this even more like tangible, one of the big things in all of the of agile is management of dependencies. I've seen some safe boards like visualizing dependency with strings and whatever. It looked like a rat's nest, and it was impossible to figure out what was what. If you have throughput focus and you look at the constraint, then dependencies just like evaporate. They are just the line in front of the constraint that brings the most value. Problem solved, and it is solved only because we have a one metric, which is the throughput. Of course, this would bring about like the follow-up question about how do you do that? How do you do prioritization and selection in the context of Tameflow? And yes, maybe that's another episode, John. But the point is that dependency management is like something that is it's almost a non-problem. There are many things that in the normal functioning of conventional organizations are huge problems, but they are not. They are artificial problems. So if we can change our lenses and use different mental models to interpret reality, the physical reality of things moving through a company producing flow, a lot of that is stuff that disappears. It does not exist. It exists in our minds.
So I think what you're trying to say, for Ian, is that if you don't have the kind of unity of purpose, if you like, in terms of if we're not using the same language at the top as we're using at the team level, then you're going to have these kind of cascading objectives that aren't going to be, people are always going to be trying to map them. But if everybody can kind of say, this is where we're going, because you're using throughput accounting and everybody's focused on the current cash and the future cash, and then if everybody understands that that's what we're trying to achieve, then it becomes more straightforward to align. Is that what you're saying?
And not only is it more straightforward, yes, it's what I'm saying, but it's not only more straightforward. It's that a lot of latent, hidden conflict in the organization that are created, one, because of the budgeting process, which is slicing the pie, and hey, John, my pie needs to be larger than yours, right? No, that's obvious. And the other one is that it's not only about slicing the pie, it's that then I get rewarded to get that pie by things that are completely different. Maybe, I don't know, John, maybe you are motivated by, I don't know, jelly beans, and I'm motivated by, I don't know, Toblerone chocolates. So I would be fighting for one and you would be fighting for the other. And of course the budget is one, and I am all for reducing the budget to buy jelly beans and increasing the budget to buy Toblerone. So you see, I and you all of a sudden have a conflict, despite the fact that we are in the same company. Why? Because we don't have a unified notion of how this cake should be split in, I don't say a fair way, It's not a matter of fairness, but in a way that we all can unanimously agree to. So we would be very happy to exchange our jelly beans and bits of Toblerone with something completely different, which is called throughput. I don't know what the equivalent is in terms of cookies and candies, but something that we both would enjoy enormously and eat together, so to say. I don't know if that renders the idea. Do you like jelly beans, John?
I love them. I prefer Toblerone though. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And just on that as well, so like a lot of organizations do care about current cash flow, but the difference basically the difference with the Tameflow approach is it's not just current cash, it's also future cash, right?
Well, it all goes back to throughput accounting, and the fact is that what happens in the future depends on what you're doing today.
Yeah.
So many of the actions that you do today will determine that future. So you have to keep cash coming in today because you have to pay the bills. But if you are, take the classical Nokia, or Nokia as you maybe like to pronounce it, case, they didn't see the smartphone. They had a perfect machine to create money now, but they missed completely the money in the future. So they did not have a sufficient flow of ideas, flow of initiatives to create the future present, so the future now. So in that sense, there is this connection, and it's not quite a distinction. They are strictly connected. If you're not making sufficient money now, you cannot have the resources to develop what you need in the future. And the future always needs like forward looking. And I think this is something that Agile is a bit, how can we say, I get mixed feelings there, because on the one side, you want to be agile and adaptable, but if you have structured your business in such way that you miss the boat,
Yeah.
You're not doing the right thing, so to say.
Yeah.
The same old right thing and thing right.
Yeah, absolutely. Lean UX is pretty strong in that regard, but yeah, I take your point. And there's a thing called evidence-based management as well, where they talk about current value, like how much are you milking the cow right now, and the future cash, as you talked about, unrealized value, the unmet needs of the customer that we might not even be serving, we might not even realize we're serving it. So yeah, thank you for that. And Matthew's got a couple of more questions as well. Actually, there were a few points, sorry. So this is looking back to my pivoting I was talking about earlier. Matthew says, so my question really is, what is expected effect section of the canvas is really a hypothesis?
So I have to distinguish here. In the world of TOC, it's not a hypothesis, it's a hard number. But of course, TOC was very much into the deterministic manufacturing production world, and also in the project world with critical chain project management, but still in a situation where you could make projections with some sort of reliability. So the expected effect in the TOC world is typically expressed as a result that you want to achieve. When you transition to the pattern thinking, the one that we have not seen today, then this notion of a canvas in a node, and in that case the node is not in a tree, but it is in a network, because the pattern language is a network. So in this sense, it's a superset of what you just said before, John, of the OKRs being traversal as well. So you can model that in terms of pattern languages. There, the canvas has the expected effect that very often is an hypothesis. Why? Because we are in knowledge work where you can you might not know what you want, but you can make hypothesis and test it. So yes, in let's say the next episode or the next step, that's where this is going to. Matthew is correct.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up as well. So one more question. How deep should the hierarchy be to be optimal? And is only at the bottom level of the triangle that we have real execution and knowledge work?
Well, real execution is when some person is doing something. So if we, let's see if I maybe can go, the screen is still on there, right?
It is, yeah.
So if we just go back, if I can click right, 2 steps.
Yeah.
Here we had this the first node, which was broken down in these steps. Okay, now those steps could be insufficient, and then you like develop a new node because you need more knowledge, so to say. You need more information to make that happen. Or maybe one of these steps, we haven't written it, but suppose it's that one. That one is, so to say, executable. Someone can do it, and then of course the expectation is that it gets done. The point being that at a certain point, no matter where in the hierarchy you are, you get to refine the thinking to the point where it is actually doable. So anywhere in the hierarchy this can happen, not only at the bottom.
Thank you, Steve, for that. So I'll just put you back fully on screen there. And so Matthew, just let me know if we've addressed your question, and Ian as well, if you could let us know as well if you've addressed your question. So Pradeep has a question. How do you achieve this throughput focus?
So there are 2 parts of the answer. One is if you are on the operational side, you really need to start to use throughput metrics. So look at the works of Dan Vacanti. He's done some brilliant writings with his actionable agile books. And what's the other one, John? When will it be done? Is it something like that?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the reference. So start using flow metrics, throughput metrics on the operational side. But that's a necessary part, but it's not sufficient. Many companies are doing this. They're using Kanban, they're using flow metrics, but yet they do not achieve this. And the reason is that they are not involving the top echelons. So the CEO, and in particular the CFO, the financial part of the company. The financial part needs to be brought on board with throughput accounting. And the only body of knowledge that develops this is theory of constraints, and of course Tameflow. In the agile space, Tameflow is the only one that does this. So it's something that you probably need to delve into, because you won't find it anywhere. Throughput accounting is also, I warn you here, no caveat emptor, as I say, is also a bit controversial in the world of the accountants. Why? Well, because unfortunately, Dr. Goldratt was very how can you say, energetic, and he once said that cost accounting is public enemy number 1, and the accountants didn't quite appreciate that. But I think we can change that and move beyond like this characterization and perception of negativity about it, because once the connection is made between the financial results and what is happening on the field, for instance with Kanban implementations, or even better from my perspective with Tameflow implementations, then there is no question. I mean, the company will be making more money today and in the future.
Thank you very much, Steve. Got some more comments coming in there. So Ian has come back and said, thanks, John and Steve. Useful advice for the visibility check-ins. Thank you, Ian, for asking us. Matthew came back and said, thank you, Steve, and thank you, John. Thank you, Matthew, as well. And Jersey has a question. This question. In the triangle of strategic and tactics, there is what and how. What about the lacking why element? Start with why thing. How I can discuss strategy without answering the why question?
Oh, that's easy. On top of this, which is not drawn on the boards, we have the goal of the company. That's the why.
Yeah.
And on top of the goal, if you want to be even more like um, transcendental, we have the purpose of the company.
Yeah.
So it's not drawn on these slides, but it is like a precondition. It's a necessary condition. The company must have a purpose and a goal.
Okay, I think we've run out of comments. Just going to give people one more minute. Just showing you the offer for the book as well. It's at tameflow.com/special offer. And it's reduced from $120 to under $50. So just check that out. If you want to critique my draft OKRs, my personal ones, happy for you to do that. So there's a simple URL, bit.ly/John C. OKRs. They're not perfect. And it's Jersey's already found in there and one of them. So thank you for doing that. So really important that they're outcome focused. So it's just an example to kind of give you an idea how they might actually work. Also a reminder as well about the Tameflow community. And not only that, Steve has his own live streams going on. There's Herbie.
This evening, yes.
This evening, yeah.
Yes.
So where do people register for that, Steve? Where do they find out about it? Where do they go?
So it was that YouTube channel or broadcast I had.
Yeah, thank you.
Up there.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you want to get like the notification of the next upcoming ones, you can register on tameflow.com/campfire, and you will get notified of the upcoming ones. And right now, I'm doing them as you have taught me, John, with StreamYard and YouTube. But I think that soon I will also open up the stream for the Twitter platform. What is it, Periscope?
Yeah.
And hopefully even LinkedIn, if they LinkedIn they have to approve suspicious people before they are allowed to broadcast.
Yeah, indeed. Jersey came back. They haven't approved me yet, by the way. I've applied for 10 times. I think you'll be okay, though. You published a book in your own, so with Daniel. So Jersey said thanks for the answer. Steve, anything else you want to wrap up the session with? Because I think we're at the end of our comments now at this stage. So anything else you'd like to say to people who are watching?
Well, I presume there are many agile coaches in the audience, and what I'm seeing now after publishing the book and relaunching the website and starting with these media production exercises with the webinars, there is a growing interest in Tameflow. So any coaches that would like to take on this opportunity, or get in touch with me or Daniel Dwarong, and the business of Tameflow will develop. And I know you, John, are interested as well. So
Absolutely, it's a great community. Really, very enthusiastic and very high caliber people in the community as well. So if you want to join the Champions League of Kanban, no better place, I would say. Oversimplifying by saying Kanban, I know that.
Champions League of Kanban, I like that.
So Steve, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you coming on 2 weeks in a row. And best of luck with your campfires. And hopefully we'll have you on again sometime in the future, maybe talking about prioritization, because that came up during this live stream, which is a topic in itself. Yeah, appreciate your time, and thank you, audience, as well, for your participation today.
Thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I learned from you how to conduct these webinars. So I'm really grateful for these lessons.
Oh, I'm learning from you. It's you're continuing to break my brain, and that's really good. I like that. Thank you. You wrecked my head for the weekend, so I'll have to think about a few things you said. So Pradeep has come in, says thanks for the answer, Steve. How many companies have you seen implementing cost flow accounting?
Throughput accounting, maybe that is.
Yeah, we meant, yeah.
So throughput accounting comes from TOC, and TOC has like an infinite list of companies where this has been done. In terms of Tameflow, the number is much more reduced, because up and until now, Tameflow has been like a one-man gang exercise, and it's been myself and myself, me and myself. So the reach I've had has not been that broad, but we are getting on board lots of people, and I also like to mention that Daniel Dwaron, believe it or not, I mean, when he told me, I did not believe him first. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He is a certified public accountant, and when I got him to discover like throughput accounting, he was excited as a little kid. So I'm sure Daniel will develop this whole notion to another level, if nothing else, because he has the mindset, the vocabulary, and the mental models and habits of the accounting professional. So the communication that will develop from Tameflow towards the accounting professionals will evolve way beyond than what it's been up until now. I'm not an accountant, so I think Daniel is going to fill in a very significant gap there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Making the accounting community aware of throughput accounting, so hopefully we're not finding it so difficult to go on that journey. Some thank yous as well from Matthew. Thank you, Matthew, for joining again. Angela Chitu from Bucharest. Thank you, Angela. Ellen Galestiner, met her at a large-scale Scrum training session, and she was involved in a couple of the less conferences as well. Lovely to have you here, Ellen. And Ellen might be a future guest as well. And Anna, thank you as well for joining. And Frederic, last but not least, great job. Thanks for your time and generosity in sharing your work and expertise. Thank you all. Thank you everybody for your engagement, and really enjoyed it myself today. And it's very timely for me, because that's something that I'm working on at the moment. Another couple of ones as well from let me see here, from Daniel saying thanks, Ian saying thanks for the session. Thank you, Ian. Daniel saying it was great. Thank you, Daniel. And Jersey saying thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. Bye, all. Okay, so with that, we're going to say over and out. Thank you very much all for your time. Have a lovely weekend wherever you are. It's not a public holiday in the UK, but I believe it is a lot around Europe, and I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but the sun is shining here. I hope the sun is shining where you are as well, and have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and in 4 hours I'll be live again with the campfire.
Good stuff.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.